Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 70 of the Citrix Session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'm excited. Number 70. I can't believe we've gotten 70 of these things done, and by mid-year we'll be up to 100. I'm pretty sure, and we're really, without a doubt, hitting the mark on what the goal of the podcast is, which is just another way for people who work in the EUC cloud Citrix space to consume these conversations that maybe you wouldn't have time to consume if you were just reading the blog. And we provide, hopefully, some additional content and context along the way. Bill Sutton's with me. Bill is a Citrix guy, has been since the late 90s, and I'm sure I've introduced him plenty of times, but Bill is our director of services. Bill, how's this week going?
Pretty good, actually. Things are looking well. Everybody's busy, and it looks to be that way for the next couple of weeks at least.
Yeah,
it is hard to believe. I'll agree with you. 70 is, we were, didn't seem that long ago we were at 50, and now, goodness, we're at 70. So it's great.
Yeah. And we're lucky to have with us from Citrix Vishal, and I'm going to do it. Ganeriwala.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, thanks, Andy. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hey, we've got you on today because there's two topics at Citrix that I really, I eat, sleep, breathe this stuff, and I still need some help with. The first one, the one we're going to talk about today, it's pretty much all coming together. I kind of get it, but let's talk about it. That's the WVD, or the Microsoft Enterprise, Windows, Desktop, and Azure, both story, and how Citrix plays in that world. We've done several podcasts on that. That's what this topic is about. At the same time, Reich and where that plays in. We've got a podcast coming up in a couple of weeks. So, if you want to touch on the Reich acquisition at all, feel free. If you don't, that's fine too. But before we jump into that, what's your role at Citrix?
So I run VP of product marketing and coming up for 18 years at Citrix.
Oh, wow.
So this will be my legal, at least, driving age and soon to be in a drinking age at Citrix. Yeah.
And are you located in Fort Lauderdale, India, West Coast? Where are you located?
No, I'm in South Florida, Andy. Yeah. So been with Citrix 18 years in so many different roles, from engineering, business development, escalation, doing developer network, and now running product marketing.
So let's don't prolong this too much, but I do want to try this with you. Just in order of how it happened, go through the products that you've been working on or with or managing or running. Just boom, 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 boom. What all? Just to give our listeners just a sense of your background. Can you get through them all? Do you even remember all the ones you've been responsible for?
Yeah, it's WinFrame, MetaFrame, Presentation Server, XenApp. And now it's Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop and Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. Yeah. That's the way.
Well, and I hope our listeners get this, but you're the perfect person to have on with Bill and I, because no matter where Citrix is going, the Reich acquisition, the micro apps with intelligence, that's all great stuff. But if you're a Citrix guy, that WinFrame, MetaFrame, Presentation Server, CVAD, that's who you are, right? You can't be a Citrix guy without being one of those, without having that in your DNA.
Yeah. So yeah, would you like me to just start around what I hear from customers and around Windows Virtual Desktops and just Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service? What's going on there?
Let me share my screen and bring up the blog so we kind of force ourselves to kind of go in that order. And I think I just pulled up the wrong blog. That would be normal for me to do so. Let me pull up the WVD blog. So tell us in the beginning of the blog, that's great, what you're trying to get across in the intro as it relates to the WVD story and how that plays into a Citrix world.
Yeah, and let me start by just addressing the elephant in the room question, right? I think this is the number one question we started seeing or getting from our customers was, hey guys, Windows Virtual Desktops is free. Why do I need Citrix? Right? Help us understand the cost models and what's going on. And as they are going through this journey, they are obviously moving some of their workloads or all their workloads from on-prem to the cloud. And so what we wanted to do and start answering questions around what is the ROI of moving workloads from an on-prem environment to Azure, what's the ROI for the customer? And then more importantly, will doing it with Citrix save them even more? So that's the purpose, right? And to answer the big question, WVD is free. Why do I need Citrix? And so we go through it and really go through it in a way where a customer would do the deployment, and we take an example of 500 users or 1,000 users and really do the comparison.
And Vishal, is your response to that? You don't really save money if you try to do it without us. Is your response to that is you're losing so many technical benefits and features that you should do it without us? Or is your response what Bill and I typically get to do because we don't own the Citrix product? Like, okay, let's go try WVD, figure out what works for you. And then we already know that chances are in the high 90% that they're still going to need Citrix in order to make it a compelling product for their use cases. Or in your world, is it a little bit of all three of those ends up being the response to somebody saying, hey, I don't need Citrix anymore?
No, actually, it is actually both, right? I mean, if you think about, I can go and tell the value add story, which is really awesome around, hey, if you are looking at a hybrid cloud management, I mean, the biggest value prop is the number one question I start by asking questions to the customer is, hey, have you moved all your workloads to Azure today? Or are you thinking of doing it in phases? And do you think your end environment will have 100% of your workloads in Azure? And if the answer is no, and you need a hybrid environment, then you're looking at something that Citrix provides. And so that actually, answers a lot of customers starting saying, oh, I got it. And then I ask them a second question, which is around, what is the end goal for supporting your contingent workforce or contractors or interns? Are you looking for something which is desktop as a service, which is finished goods, right? You do one bill from one vendor and you get full service in the end. And they're like, yeah. So we have both the hybrid use case and the DaaS use case. And then I explain them, well, if you need a full-blown DaaS with a managed capacity single bill from just one vendor with like 5 clicks, that's not what WVD does, right? And WVD doesn't do hybrid. So you're basically not getting both of your requirements, which you actually started doing.
Yeah.
And that really helps them understand. And then we can go over some of the operational benefits and technical benefits. But I say, you know what? Even if everything was apples to apples, let's assume everything was apples to apples in feature parity, in terms of management benefits and everything else. Let's compare the cost. And I'll take, and I ask them, yes.
Can we break this up? Because that's what let's talk about the capabilities piece first, because I think the cost one, I definitely want you to kind of focus on that one in a minute, because that's the one everybody thinks they know, but they probably don't know. The capabilities one is probably the easier of the two. Let me ask you and Bill a question. When's the last time you went to a hardware store and bought a simple Phillips head screwdriver?
It's been a while.
You probably haven't, right? You haven't bought a basic screwdriver in 20 years.
It's been a while. Yeah, exactly.
Because when you go to buy a screwdriver these days, you always buy a multifunction screwdriver, because you don't want to limit yourself to a medium-sized Phillips screwdriver, because that might work in this use case, but it's not going to work for the use case that's going to come tomorrow, right?
Correct.
So hopefully that makes sense as to how I took Vishal's comment and turned it into a screwdriver, right? WVD is a great little screwdriver, but it better fit the screw head that you need it to. If not, you're going to have to find something else after you get that one loose or tightened.
Yeah. The way I also start asking is the discovery question, right? It's about the choice and the capabilities you need, right? So let's spend like maybe 5 minutes on the capabilities, because it's interesting. And it's interesting when you start asking these discovery questions to the customers. And the first ones I ask is, are you 100% Microsoft stack? And for most of us, like the way we are doing these things these days, we are doing this on a Zoom call versus a Microsoft Teams stuff, right? And it's like, no, we're not Microsoft Teams, we're using Zoom. So right off the bat, we're like, well, if you want to optimize Zoom, that's Citrix. So I start asking them questions around, well, what authentication systems do you use for identity management? Are you an Okta or Azure AD? And if the answer is Okta, I'm just trying to start eliminating, if you're using Okta, you will need something like Citrix or Google identity provider, then you'll need Citrix. Then I start asking them, what content collaboration tools do you use? Are you Box, Dropbox, ShareFile, or OneDrive? The answer is, well, not OneDrive, right? And then so it becomes very clear if you keep going down that stack with content collaboration tools, with identity management tools, with all these things, that if you need to support, yes.
How many of these tools does it take before you fall into, yes, I need something to make WVD more robust, right? It only takes one strategic tool to push you into a use case where you need something that's more embracive of everybody else's technologies, right?
Yeah. And then, the answer also around, you nailed it, Andy, is around, hey, are you going to be always on Azure? Is there a chance that you might provision these workloads on Google or Amazon someday? And if you want to keep your options open, right, it's Citrix helps you do this, not just hybrid, but multi-cloud VDI deployments. And, you can absolutely do those things only with Citrix. So it becomes very clear. And even if the answer is Microsoft Teams, then I ask them, well, do you want to optimize only on Windows, or do you want to do Chromebooks, Macs, and thin clients optimization as well? And as soon as you start hearing the answer, in 99.999% of the calls I've had, I mean, once you do this discovery, that you don't, I don't even have to go into the cost. You're right. And it just becomes, okay, I need Citrix for these reasons.
Right. Vishal, I have a question for you to kind of tie this into a different type of conversation, but to make it come back to this one. In your family, in your immediate family, how many cars do you have? How many cars and trucks do you have?
Yeah, we have two with me and my wife. Just two cars right now. Yeah.
And what kind of cars are they?
She has a Lexus and I have a BMW.
Okay, so why don't you both have a Lexus or both have a BMW?
Yeah, different choices. We have different
choices.
Tastes. Yeah.
Now watch this. I'll do the same thing with Bill. Watch this. Bill, how many cars do you have in your immediate family?
Two.
Two. And what manufacturer are those two cars?
They're both Hondas.
They're both Hondas, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Do you think if I were to offer you a 10% discount on Hondas for the rest of your life, would you take it if you had to agree that you would only drive Hondas for the rest of your life?
Probably not.
You wouldn't take it, right? It's not worth the discount to lock yourself in and have no choice.
Correct.
Yeah.
You guys see how that kind of ties into this conversation?
That's a great I may steal that, Andy, from you and start doing it on devices. Yeah, you start doing that, and it's so clear that people want to be open to the choices.
Right. I'll give you my personal thing. I grew up a Ford guy. I'm still an American-made Ford guy. Love Fords, blah blah blah. But when it was time to buy my wife a new midsize SUV, she wouldn't even look at a Ford. Well, guess what? I wasn't about to tell her she had to buy a Ford because I'm a Ford guy. I let her have her choice because it was better to have a happy wife than it was to force her to buy into my brand loyalty.
Yeah. Users need choice too on the end, right? The devices they want to use, the apps they want to use to collaborate. Yeah. It's not just that, it's the ecosystem choice and working with your existing investments.
Right. Bill, any questions or thoughts on the capabilities and the functionality of Citrix extending the ability for you to have choice and features and functions in a WVD world, or maybe better yet, in a world where you're not using WVD, you're actually just using the Microsoft virtual desktop on Azure entitlement that comes with WVD?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think you guys captured most of it. And what we have seen, on the consulting side is a lot of customers that, like you said earlier, Andy, that have started with WVD and then pivoted to Citrix, realizing they couldn't get everything they wanted. And then we also have customers that come to us and say, I want Windows 10 multi-session on Azure because I want to be in Azure and I want to use a Windows 10 operating system with Citrix. So we see both use cases coming down, to us to implement.
And Bill, what percentage of WVD straight up pilots have we done that the customer clearly eliminated any other options other than WVD?
We've done a few, but they didn't end up. I'm not sure if we were asking whether they ended up in that, but we've had a few that their focus was, we don't want the competitors, we want Windows WVD, we want Microsoft WVD. And ultimately they ended up doing it and testing it and they liked it, but a lot of the things they wanted outside of it, they couldn't get with Microsoft. So or it wasn't as robust. So they moved to a Citrix management plane. It's actually pretty easy to do because at the end of the day, it's really all about what's in the Windows 10 multi-session OS. We just swap out the VDA equivalent.
And that's what I'm getting at here, guys. Most people who think they want WVD don't actually want WVD. They want multi-session Windows 10 and Azure, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Vishal, any other features, functionalities, capabilities that we maybe haven't touched on here that Citrix can bring, CVAD, Citrix Virtual App and Desktop Service, can bring to a customer that WVD is not close to, maybe years away from getting to that point? And we'd be remiss if we just didn't talk about the protocol. I mean, the Citrix protocol versus everybody else's, or certainly the Microsoft protocol, is still way more capable. And I will highlight real quick, and I'm sorry to keep going here, the idea that you had a while ago that, hey, the only meeting platform is not always going to be Teams. You're going to need Zoom. You're going to need WebEx. You're still going to need some of these things because you don't always get to dictate what your meeting platform is going to be. That's where Citrix is an example of kicking in.
Right.
That's a great point. I mean, look, even if you're standardized on Teams, you might have a meeting with your partner and they might have a Zoom, right? And you don't get to dictate your customer meetings, right? Your customer might be using completely different system. And so the way I also think, Andy, in terms of capabilities is, it's in the three big buckets. It's the experience bucket, which we just discussed around HTX and the protocol and everything. The second bigger bucket is around, the security bucket, where over the last 20 years, all that conditional access, security policies built into it. And if you're a listener who knows about smart access with our gateway products and how we do those things, contextual access, to things like session recording or app protection policies and things like security analytics, all those things are really meaningful for our large scale enterprise customers and mid-sized customers, where they're really thinking around, hey, it's a good experience needs to get balanced with a good security. And a lot of times when customers realize that we provide them a very secure DAS and VDI environment and provide them all these enterprise capabilities, they really start to rethink and think about Citrix.
And it might be possible for someone to say, hey, I don't need that feature, I don't need this feature. And then you've got in your back pocket, or whoever's talking to them has what about this security feature? What about that security feature? And what about the security features you don't know yet you need? Good luck getting that timely out of Microsoft. Citrix is still small and nimble enough that customers can come to them with ideas and things you need. And there's a good chance it's going to show up in the product in the next quarter or two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just integrating on those security features, even outside the core Microsoft stack, as I was saying, if you want a conditional access with a nothing with Defender or with non-Azure AD stuff, all that stuff, and supporting that your secure access into a very heterogeneous IT world. That's where the beauty comes in preserving the existing things. I mean, even that said, we from a Citrix point of view, we really like the Azure platform for our customers because it really gives them this choice of scaling really fast. Our engineering teams have worked together so much to really help our joint customers scale better, like whether it comes to provisioning system, yet another benefit of Citrix and Microsoft together on Azure, right? At the end of the day, customers want to provision thousands of these desktops and then support the end user through monitoring tools like Director or Performance Analytics, where it's not just day one. Let's say even 500 users or 1,000 users, you roll out your VDI or DAS environments, and day 3 or day 4, your users call in and say, "Hey, my desktop is running slow." Then what do you do? Right? You need that visibility and insights which are built in to troubleshoot for your level 1, level 2 staff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't succeed.
And it's good you point that out, right? It's not just that Citrix extends what Microsoft does within desktops in Azure. Microsoft and others provide a service that Citrix has needed for a long time, and that's scalability both up and down without having to make massive capital investments. That's a huge for the desktop as a virtual desktop, virtual app, aka Citrix story that's mutually beneficial.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is where I think, Bill, you nailed it. When customers misinterpret that Windows 10 multi-session VM is WVD, right? They then very quickly realize, oh, I can just add this new VM type to the Citrix environment and scale in Azure to my existing Citrix environment, and then I can continue to use all the benefits.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, guys, let me introduce before we move into the money conversation, and that's the one that, maybe it gets harder to justify, maybe not. It's not as clear as it is for technical guys like us to see the features that are missing and where the mutual benefits exist in both worlds. We got this security story. What about the Vishal? This is going to be a difficult one. So I'll be curious to see how quickly you respond to it. I think you will. I think you'll have no problem with it at all. What about what it seems like the intentional misleadingness of Microsoft not telling you WVD versus enterprise virtual desktop in Azure? How does that confuse people from your perspective that really should more quickly, easily see that WVD and an enterprise virtual desktop in Azure, multi-session is two different things? But Microsoft seems to have jumped all over the WVD marketing machine, and they don't stop to explain the difference quite often.
So look, from a Microsoft perspective, I think they're not intentionally trying to mislead on, at least my perspective on WVD versus the Win 10 multi-session VM platform. I think it just so happened because of so much noise in the social media, PR and media, and especially last year, what happened is because of the COVID, when everybody was jumping on the DAS and VDI like platforms, it all got very confusing. And a lot of people who have never done DAS or VDI, from a customer point of view, when they started associating these two as synonyms. And now at least, with the help of partners like you, customers are getting a better understanding on, okay, let's focus on the business outcomes. What do I really want? I want to do business continuity projects. I want to support my remote workers or workers who might be accessing some of my applications remotely or from any device. Or do I have to solve a use case around agility about mergers and acquisitions? That's the use cases I'm trying to solve, or business outcomes I'm trying to get. And then how I can solve is where, Andy, you and your team comes in really amazing, guides the customer and providing them the best answer. It's, you can really quickly go dive into these nitty-gritty details on WVD and EVD and all those things, but that doesn't really help, right? And at least that's how I'm thinking about the answer here.
Well, I'll give you a quick real-world example. It was just a week ago. I'm on a call with a customer and Microsoft, and Microsoft said, "Yeah, we're talking about WVD," and then they described enterprise or EVD, what we originally called it, enterprise virtual desktop or multi-session Windows 10 on Azure, And when I stopped the conversation and explained WVD is the brokering system and the management system, enterprise virtual desktop in Azure is something that everybody can benefit from with or without WVD, the response back from the Microsoft salesperson was, yeah, that's what I meant. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But if I wasn't here, you would have just confused the customer more into thinking WVD was the actual Windows 10 desktop in Azure, not the entitlement, the free, if you will, brokering system that you get with Microsoft versus paying for like a Citrix to make it more robust and more enterprise ready. Are you seeing that quite commonly? And I don't think it's necessarily intentionally misleading, but it's very, very misleading.
Yeah, I would say there is a confusion in the market, and I hope that confusion resolves over time because there's a lot of new Azure admins. Right? I mean, it's like historically, people who did apps and desktop virtualization or DAS and everything else were people in the data center people. And now what's really going on is what I see from customer point of view is a lot of Azure admins are now being asked to scale up and provide these DAS desktop because they are the cloud admins, not the data center admins anymore.
Yeah.
And they don't have that previous knowledge about VDI and DAS. And so it's important for them to understand the differences, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch these two worlds, infrastructure as a service and desktop management as a service collide, and watching people who typically stayed on each side of the fence now having to get in the same room and do it together or learn each other's job.
Yeah, no, that's I agree. I mean, there's a lot going on, and from if I was a customer, a senior IT leader, I would again ask questions regarding what business objectives am I trying to solve? Will the solution which I'm going to buy into give me the flexibility over the time to solve my business problems in a changing world, in a changing environment, right? And go from there. Versus, it's easy to get into the feature wars, but if you abstract everything away and say, hey, does this solve my problem? Does this give me flexibility over time or not? The same question you asked Bill.
So guys, let's turn this conversation from from technical and features and even marketing, where I went into a minute ago. Let's talk about money, right? So at the end of the day, showing that we're actually saving money by adding another product. How do we do that, Vishal? How do you talk to customers about making sure they realize that doing it the cheapest way? You guys all know who Doug Brown is. Doug and I had a conversation a couple of years ago and said he's too poor to buy cheap. And what he meant by that was he doesn't buy cheap stuff. He buys a cost-effective quality stuff because he can't afford to replace cheap stuff 3 and 4 times. And a lot of people think that being cost conscious always has to mean cheap.
So you nailed it, Andy, right? And this is where, value, we are an option which just happens to provide you way more value at a cost, which is better than, if you went just native WVD. And so let me explain, this is a point of confusion. And I do get a lot of strange looks when I talk about the cost effectiveness of the solution, because it's very counterintuitive. And you're saying WVD is free, and if I add Citrix, are you saying my overall cost would be lower? How's that even possible? Right? And so I say, okay, let's take a step back and see, what does your overall cost consist of? WVD might be free, but you're paying for your Azure overall consumption, which is your infrastructure cost. And what does that comprise of? Your compute, your storage, and your bandwidth or your networking components. Where does your overall cost, in addition to your infrastructure cost, consist of? You'll probably have admins who's going to manage these environments, and you'll have an operational cost, right? People will call in to say, I'm having problems with my virtual desktops environment. So your ability to close your tickets as fast as possible, your support tickets, and resolve those things, and making sure your users are productive again is really, really important. Your ability as part of that operational cost to provision these desktops in the most efficient manner and roll back changes when something goes wrong is really, really important. And your ability to do the hybrid cloud management. I mean, remember we talked about in case you wanted to provision something on-prem or different clouds is really important. So all those things come into the the operational cost. And what's the final cost? The licensing itself, right? If you think about it, yeah, there's a licensing components. And so for licensing components, you might even look at some of the third-party components you might need to buy if you were going with a native WVD solutions, right? And some functionality you might have to actually add on top of those things. And you have to compare that with what comes with built-in Citrix solutions. So I usually walk through these three big topics. It's the infrastructure cost components, is the Azure compute, and how Citrix lowers overall Azure compute when it comes to both the infrastructure, storage, and networking. And I then walk a customer through the operational pieces. And then I talk about the licensing cost, even adding a Citrix licensing cost on top, how they're actually saving money because of the infrastructure and operational components.
Yeah. Can I give you guys another automotive example? I think in terms of automotive stuff a lot. It's like multiple times in my life, I've bought a pickup truck or a full-size SUV, and I saved money by buying a two-wheel drive version, and then something in my life changed, and I needed a four-wheel drive more consistently, and I couldn't, like I had to sell the two-wheel drive and now go and replace it with a four-wheel drive. I'd have been better off in the beginning just buying a four-wheel drive, because the cost of transitioning from one vehicle to another, the depreciation, I should have just bit the bullet, spent an extra $1,200, $2,000 in the beginning and bought a four-wheel drive, because I didn't know what I didn't know was coming around the corner.
Yeah. And so Andy, that's a great example, and that just clarifies a lot of things. I'll give your listeners one more example. The way I think about the analogy in this case is the typical thermostats you use in your in your homes, and you probably I don't know anyone anymore with those old programmable ones, with the manual ones where you have to walk in and adjust the temperatures from Monday to Friday, and I click, do it, and so on. And there came along the newer kinds on your phone, as you're showing it to me, right? The Nest or the Echobees. And if you think about it, what happened, right? They are more expensive than the free ones, which come in your home pre-installed, and the manual ones. If you think about it, the newer kinds, or the smart, intelligent thermostats like Nest and Ecobee, what they really do is, over a period of time, even though there might be a cost associated to buy them and install them in your house, save you electricity, give you more flexibility, and they're just based on their intelligence, they save you electricity bill over a period of time. So just within 1 year, you'll see, oh, even if I spend $100 on these devices, I'm saving $500 in electricity. And it's so convenient. I can program it while I'm not at home. It can auto adjust things and do things extremely smart, right? And I can have a child lock, so he doesn't accidentally provide me some security features on these things, so he's not changing things around. So yeah, I mean that's the analogy I think about in my mind. Is it's when you spend money sometimes on some of these things, you might end up saving way more than you originally thought.
Well, and then think about that same example. Then what if you sell that house, but now you move to another one, and that new house gets integrated into that service that you've already set up in the cloud? That's where, taking this story and then adding the cloud management plane, Citrix, so that the user experience becomes better, and you don't have to go back into the new house and program that old clunky display, old clunky thermostat. You just take your existing policies and apply it to the new house.
You nailed it. Yeah. Now thanks for extending it. Yeah. You carry with them. Yeah.
Yep. And then what about in a pinch, like a pandemic, or like you go on vacation and you forget to turn the thermostat up or down before you leave. Now you're sitting at the airport and you just do it right from your phone.
Yeah. You don't have to think about, did I adjust it down or what did I do? And you have more control, right? You have more flexibility. And these systems are smart enough that over a period of time, they actually help you save more money.
And even better than all that, potentially you have peace of mind.
Peace of mind. That's key. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
many times have you guys gone on vacation and not remembered whether you turned the water off in your house or not, and not knowing whether you're going to come back to a flooded house because a pipe burst?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Or you've got people coming in and out of the house through the garage and you want to make sure that they close the door. Seriously. Yeah. I have notifications and there have been cases where they forgot to close it. And we had to reach out and say, go close it.
And then take this back to the automotive example. I was at the airport the other day and I couldn't remember where I parked. I wish I had a car that had an app that I could just tell it to show me where my car is.
Right.
30 minutes walking around the rain looking for my car. While my wife and 4 kids were at the airport baggage claim saying, where are you at? Where are you at?
That's why when you think around just overall systems, and it might be counterintuitive to think about these things, investing in systems which give you that intelligence and flexibility and choice over a period of time, I would always choose them before anything else. Right? And this is why we go for choice. It's like, sometimes I also feel like, what if there was an ice cream shop with just one flavor of ice cream? Would I go there, or would I take my kids to an ice cream shop where at least they have 5 or 10 flavors of, and everyone's choice is different. We know that inherently.
Yeah. So guys, let's talk about the tool here, the calculator. So it's one thing for us to talk about it, but it's another thing to put it through a process that actually can produce a number for us. Vishal, you want to talk about the Citrix Virtual Desktop cost savings calculator?
Yeah. So before we produce this tool, we knew that there are infrastructure savings on compute, storage, and networking. We knew there are savings on the operational side of the thing. So we wanted to do 2 things. One, actually have spreadsheets of data and do actual lab testing by an independent third party. We hired a third party to actually do these things side by side on how are we really saving these infrastructure savings. So we calculated all those things. Some of the infrastructure savings comes from, Citrix does this amazing capability around workspace environment manager, which solves that noisy neighbor problem and really, really helps increase the capacity of the VMs, or number of users you can actually put on those VMs. Then the MCS IOs really help reduce the storage cost. And then the HTX bandwidth analysis itself just saves tons and tons of that network bandwidth savings. So overall, anywhere between 25% or 50% saving just around the infrastructure side. So we did that. And we would build calculations around those things, testing for 500 users, testing for 1,000 users, testing for 2,000 users. And we mapped out all those numbers. And there's a lot. And then what we did is one more thing, Andy, and this is interesting. We actually went to actual customers. And we did some surveys with them and said, how much on-prem and native to this money you are saving? Because we do have customers who initially started the WED native path, and then they switched over. So we actually did ask them from 2 or 3 customers on their actual business data, and actually it's mentioned in the paper itself. And we took some of that data, married it into the calculations and algorithms behind this calculator. And then we also did ask them questions regarding the operational savings cost. Again, the same vendor who helped us do the testing did the testing on the operational savings. We recorded every single click you need to either troubleshoot a user issue or provision a desktop, and how much time will it save, and how many hours will it correspond over a period of year, and so on. So you do actual groundwork, then put it all in the algorithm and spreadsheets. And then how do you do it? Through a simple calculator on the web and saying, all right, give me the number of users and the VM types, and let me see what the infrastructure savings might be or the operational savings might be.
Right. And it goes back to my comment a while ago about being too poor to buy cheap. And oh, by the way, ask your friends and see how their results came out. This is what you guys are doing. You have a tool to help you pre-calculate your results. And then you also have analysis of people who've already made the plunge, took the plunge. And then you go back post plunge and figure out, okay, did it really work out? Did you really save money? And that's what you guys have done here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is the data here is actually, and we went conservative on our calculator. So just to make sure, like we always take the lower bound and not the upper bound of the savings. So, if the savings comes out to be greater, it's a good surprise for the customer versus saying, oh, you said I'm going to probably save in this range and I'm not seeing those things.
Yeah.
So I truly believe most customers will see savings higher than what this calculator actually tells you to go to.
Right. Because I've got 5 minutes at the most, and then I need to jump off. Bill, thoughts on the cost savings conversation as it relates to using Citrix to integrate with, I'll call it WVD, but really we're talking about, EVD, Enterprise Virtual Desktop, or Windows Virtual Desktop Multi-Session in Azure. Thoughts on the cost savings argument?
Yeah, I this has always been something we've wanted, and customers ask for it. Why would I want to spend X dollars in licensing to Citrix to leverage my Windows 10 multi-session desktop so I can buy it from Microsoft? And so I ran the calculator, Vishal, and I'm looking at it, and it seems to me the most significant, I should say, differences are focused on compute and operational costs. I ran it with a number of different scenarios, and it seems like those are the two biggest savings areas. I mean, the others are marginal, but those are the most significant. Can you comment a little bit on that real quickly?
Yeah, no, I mean, so you're right. Look, depending on even the workload types, and you can play with the calculator a little bit more, you'll actually see that 3D workloads will have a much higher savings in terms of compute because of the HTX 3D optimizations we have done, the bandwidth it requires to actually do those 3D workloads. And in the end, the storage or our workspace environment manager and how it actually does the CPU memory optimizations for those VMs. And if you choose a Win 10 multi-session VM, those compute savings might be less, but you're absolutely right. You will probably need all three, dedicated Win 10, multi-session Win 10, or 3D workloads, and you'll start to see that the compute savings is a lot more as you keep increasing the workload type. And then operational wise, absolutely. That's a big, big, big difference, which customers don't really think about day one. And then, now I have to go manage these large scale VDI environments. And
right.
Yeah, it hits that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, so I do want to comment on that real quick. Take that same concept and then think about scaling that across into different types of cloud infrastructures, GCP, Amazon, Microsoft. And then Citrix is really the only one that's really going to allow you to, you're certainly not going to do it WVE, allow you to have your choices and determine when you spin up workloads in your data center versus cloud A or cloud B or cloud C, or maybe you do all three at the same time, but to have the intelligence of do it when you want it, how you want it, based on data that's coming out of those environments into your system. There's huge potential in the long run to save money by going back to our thermostat conversation and turning the thermostat up and down when you want to versus setting it on 68 and leaving it there all summer.
Well, yeah, and I think when you start talking about turning the thermostat up and down, the analogy for that, from my perspective, is autoscale. And one of those the key benefits that autoscale provides in being able to not just bring the workloads down, but really remove them. If they're non-persistent, I can remove those workloads so that I'm not consuming storage, except for my master image. So that's what a lot of folks don't even think about that. In a WVD world, you bring it down, you're still paying for storage. It's not pulling it out, like it normally would, particularly if you're dealing with non-persistent Windows 10 regular, single user desktops. That's a huge benefit there from autoscale.
Oh yeah, Bill, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? It does it automatically, right?
Right.
For these thermostats, you don't have to program them. You can just walk out of the house. It automatically detects there is no one in there. Let me just do it automatically for you.
Exactly.
So guys, I have in my newest house, I have one of the old school programmable thermostats upstairs. Ask me what my temperature's on right now upstairs in my new house.
What is your temperature on upstairs?
Because I don't have a cloud-centric solution in this house. I did in the old house. I have no idea.
Right.
That thing is so complicated to program. It was intended to save me money, but it's so complicated. I avoid using it. In fact, I probably set it on 68 because I don't even want to bother because it's so complex. I can't get data out of it. I can't manage it remotely. I can't tell you. I'd have to drive home right now to tell you.
I still have the one with the sliders on it, so I guess I need to get into the 90s, right, guys? Oh,
but here's a great example where it ties back to the story. I have been acting cheap, and I won't pay an extra $100 to go buy a Nest, or $200 or $300 to buy a Nest or something like it. And really, based on this conversation, that's dumb, right? I really should just spend a couple, $100, $200 right now, buy a Nest, buy 2 of them. So that I at least have the peace of mind to know when my air conditioning or my heater is running like crazy and there's nobody even home.
Right.
Yeah. No idea. And over a period of time, these investments will pay off for itself.
They will. And if nothing else, the peace of mind will pay off.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining. I always appreciate you jumping on, Vishal. We'll keep an eye out for your next, I'm sure you're doing them every week, every month, but we'll keep an eye out for a future blog and we'll have you back.
Hi, Andy and Bill. Thank you so much. This was fun. And thank you for being great Citrix partners and helping our joint customers.
Thank you, Vishal.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of you guys. Thank you.
Bye.